Here is every single book I've read this year, rapid fire reviewed. What I talk about when I talk about running by Haruki Murakami is certainly one of the books he's written in his career. This was a reread. The first time I read it in 2020, it inspired me to run a half marathon. This time it inspired me to not take a nap while I was on the plane reading it. I did get a kick out of his anecdote about running with John Irving. The first time I read it, I had not read any John Irving, and this time I had just finished The World According to Garp, so I got a little kick out of that anecdote. Ultimately, it's one of the more forgettable Murakami books. 5 Tuesdays in Winter by Lily King was a fun little book that I read. It's a short story collection about winter, and a lot of them are set in or around New England. At the time, I was experiencing my first ever winter in New England, so I liked it for that. I would not recommend starting with this book if you've never read any Lily King. I would definitely go with Writers and Lovers, which was super popular during 2020, and I got to it last year in 2024 for the first time, and I loved it. I also have Euphoria by her. I found it at a used bookstore. Love Lily King. Ugh, this was so bad. A Talent for Murder by Peter Swanson is absolutely the worst book in this 3-book series that I like to refer to as the New England murder book saga. The first book of the series had a great plot and great characters. The second book had some of the great characters from the first book, but a weaker plot. And then the third book ruins the characters from the first 2 books and has a horrible plot. The only reason I kept reading these books is because I love how the characters go to places in Cambridge or Boston that I recognize. Like, they literally go to Summer Shack in Cambridge, which is a place where I've had dinner multiple times now. So it's kind of disappointing that the book is so bad, but do better. I'm probably like the last person on earth to read The Song of Achilles and love it, but I don't have much to add to the discourse around this book except that it's a great book. If you like the Iliad, it's an interesting take on the Iliad. Definitely not meant to substitute reading the poem, but it's an interesting and modern look back at what the Iliad represents. Again, another book that I'm super late to, Gideon the Ninth. I did not like this book as much as most people tend to, mostly because I thought the plot promised something and then delivered something else. The 2 main characters, Gideon and Harrow, their relationship is so important, but they spend so little time on page together that it was hard for me to be invested in that relationship. So I don't know, I'm probably not going to be continuing on with the series, especially because my fiance has read the second book and he didn't like it, but I still love the cover. Such good covers for this series. Ammonite by Nicola Griffith. Literally Avatar, but with women instead of blue people. I liked the main character in this a lot, even though she is kind of stupid. The concept of this book is that there's a planet where only women have survived after millions of years, and they've sort of found this way to reproduce asexually. Or not asexually, they found a way to reproduce with each other without men after an infectious disease has killed off all of the men and some of the women. They've been sort of left alone for millions of years, and now they have their own culture and way of living, but they're still humans. And so this anthropologist arrives on the planet, and this corporation is trying to reclaim this planet. Kind of similar to Avatar, very 90s. The main character is kind of stupid to me. She arrives and literally does the first thing that they tell her not to do, and then ends up getting captured by this tribe of women, and then she's like does not have a good time. In my head, I was just, what did you expect, girl? Really fun book with lots of interesting concepts. I liked the use of linguistics in this book a lot, and I would actually recommend it. I think I would give it closer to 4 stars than 3. Definitely. Another like 3 to 4 star, depending on how I'm feeling at the time of day, New York 2140 by Kim Stanley Robinson. I really love optimistic climate fiction. This book struck a really good balance of being realistic about what the future will look like, but also not just being all doomerism about it. It's basically about a New York City that has been flooded due to sea levels rising. And I don't know, it's very New York-y in a very authentic way. Kim Stanley Robinson is an author I need to get to more of. I downgraded my rating of this series after thinking about it for a while. I love Maggie Stiefvater and I have a lot of nostalgia for The Raven Cycle. Even after rereading The Raven Cycle as an adult, I think that I have to recognize that Stiefvater cannot plot for the life of her. She's really good at coming up with these interesting concepts like dreamers who can take stuff out of their dreams, and fairy markets where there's an underground black market for magical goods. But I feel like this series takes on too much, and All the best parts were literally just the main characters squabbling and having family drama against this backdrop of magic. But then Stiefvater tries to add really high stakes and turn it into this apocalyptic world-ending scenario, and I was just like, we should have kept it within the family. Like, we did not need to go down that route. It's so much better when stories, I think, maintain stakes that feel real and pliable. This was another book club pick, Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. And I feel like I read so many books because of book club that I just don't end up liking, but I just finished them so I can go to the book club and hopefully make friends. Yeah, I don't know. The Yellow Wallpaper was a short story that dealt with postpartum depression and the psychosis and the pressure and stress that comes with that time period. And I feel like this book was a take on that, but didn't really add anything new to the conversation. And also just, I felt like the author had this one scene in her head of the mother going absolutely berserk and then wrote this whole book around that one scene. This book was more interested in coming off as shocking instead of actually having anything interesting to add to the conversation about postpartum depression. There's a scene in Eileen by Ottessa Moshfegh where the character does something really gross, and it's because of the casualness of what the character does that it feels that much more viscerally disgusting. And I feel like this book is so proud of every disgusting detail that the author is able to come up with. It just makes it feel so performative instead of just enhancing the disgustingness of what's going on, if that makes sense. It's really more shock value than anything. Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. I love this book. It's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and I'm reading it as part of my Pulitzer project to read every single book that has won the fiction prize since 1998. I did a pretty lengthy review of this on my channel during one of my monthly reading wrap-ups, and all I have to say is that it was just a really good book about a way of living that I myself am not personally super familiar with. I've never been to the Appalachian region. My upbringing was just completely different and removed from that way of life. So it was really interesting for me to read. I would be curious though to hear about what people who have lived in this area actually think of this book. I don't know. Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk is probably my favorite book of the year. It's about an eccentric old woman, and it's kind of like a murder mystery about nature itself taking revenge on humans who are wreaking havoc on animals and trees and plants. I highly recommend this book. Lies and Weddings by Kevin Kwan was a deeply disappointing book. I loved the Crazy Rich Asians trilogy, and in hindsight, I might have rose-colored glasses on for that trilogy, but I thought that it did a really good job of balancing social commentary with wish fulfillment when it came to these absurdly rich people. And this book, I think, leaned more on the side of flanderizing that concept, and just the characters weren't as interesting, the settings weren't as interesting, it wasn't as funny. It was bad. Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. Great book. Claire Keegan always says what she needs to say in as little words as possible, and I kind of wish that Rachel Yoder had taken a page out of her book and written a short story instead of writing a whole novel. Nonetheless, this was a great book, and I really want to watch the movie. Orbital by Samantha Harvey. If you've ever thought about space for about 30 minutes, you've read this book. It like boggles my mind that this book won the Man Booker Prize, because I'm like, why? I have to recognize that I think I'm not like the target audience for this book, but I just feel like this book would have been better if it had been a podcast. It's just so dry, it doesn't really have any panache. I don't disagree with the message that this book is trying to send. I'm glad that someone is out here making these arguments for building more affordable housing, cutting down the amount of bureaucracy, you know, funding more scientific research, but I feel like we could have done it in a way that gets people more excited. I also read the last 3 books of the Neapolitan novels by Elena Ferrante. Yeah, these books are incredible, and Elena Ferrante is now a top 5 author for me. I think I particularly appreciate the way that the characters come into their consciousness of the political systems that have been shaping them from before their birth. And I love how this book deals with feminism and patriarchy and politics in a way that is just so organic and real and beautiful. The characters and the friendship at the center of these stories are amazing, and I don't think I'll ever read anything like this again. The Alternatives by Kaylin Hughes has been described by some people as Irish Little Women, and I think that's a pretty accurate description, except that I don't think this book is quite as good as Little Women. However, I'm willing to concede that I might just not be smart enough to have understood what this book was going for. It's about 4 sisters who are Irish who all have PhDs in different fields of study. Basically, one of them goes missing on purpose. The other 3 decide to come together for the first time in 10 years to go looking for their sister. It does the same thing as like a Sally Rooney book where there's no quotations, a lot of quick banter and stuff that perhaps went over my head. There's not really a plot either aside from what I just described, and there were so many things that I thought were interesting but then never really wrap up, and the book just ends very abruptly. I don't know, I kind of like when a book challenges me, but this was just a little bit too mind-boggly for me. Legality does not equal morality, and I feel like it's so fun to see lawyers who uphold that ideal in goblin law. And it's just interesting to see how even goblins have to deal with the indignities of a broken healthcare system. And this book is just a really fun take on the fantasy genre, and I'm really excited for the sequel, Fairy Law. The Dragon's Path by Daniel Abraham is a very strong entry into a new series that I'm hoping will be a new favorite. I've been looking for my next big fantasy series to sink my teeth into. I've already started the sequel to this book and I'm loving it, perhaps even more than this book, so it's looking really promising. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching my rapid fire